Hello everybody. I'm really excited to be here for Wellness Week with some key members of the New Adventures team for their Real Adventure programme this week, brought to you in the current context of the planet. We're here to discuss what it's like to be parents working in the arts and dance specifically, and we're going to talk to each member of the team who's here with us today. We've got an amazing 6 who are going to give us their perspective on what their experience is. So if we just go round the virtual room, as it were, to introduce ourselves and just say a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what's your parental context.
No, Kerry, you go.
I was looking at my grid.
I know my grid's different to your grid.
Hi, I'm Kerry. I am resident artist for New Adventures, and I lead on our talent development programs for the company. I have 2 boys aged 5 and 2.
Excellent.
I'm Etta Murfitt. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Matthew Bourne's New Adventures. I'm responsible for restaging all the existing work in the rep and collaborating on new work and taking an artistic lead on our education programme. I am way past, I've got an adult child, she's called Isabel and she's 24. And I'm just here to talk about what happened to me when I had a young child in the arts.
Great. Lou?
Hi, I'm Lou. I'm Head of Operations at New Adventures, and I have 2 teenage children. I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son.
Great. Michela?
I'm Michela. I've worked as a dancer for the company for the last 20 years, more or less, and I work as a dancer and workshop practitioner, and I have 2 kids that are 5 and 8 years old.
Great. And last but by no means least, Imogen.
Hi, I'm Imogen. I'm the Executive Director of New Adventures and oversee and run the company, the charity, and all the work that we do. I have 3 children. I have a 7.5-year-old and twins that are 5.5.
Right. And I'm Lucy. I'm the dance mama, and I have a site called dancemama.org, which advocates and profiles women and men working across the industry, on stage, off stage, and behind laptops, who are parents. And we also do have a male voice with us this afternoon, albeit with some technical issues. So Alan Vincent will be joining us via email, and Kerry's going to do the honours and read out some of his thoughts a little bit later on. Let's kick off with Etta, who's been a long-standing role model as a parent in dance. And Etta, tell us about your experience as a parent and how that's influenced the support that's given to current company members who are parents, who I believe are so recent as one has become a parent yesterday.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so when I decided to start a family, I didn't think that I would probably continue dance afterwards, because that wasn't really an option when I had my daughter. But I was so ready to have a child at that point that took priority over everything else. And I remember sort of making that decision, right, so I'm 29, I've had a really great career, I'm going to get pregnant, have a family, then we'll see what happens after that. And at that point, there was no provision as a self-employed dancer in the arts. There was nothing, there were no structures of support at all, financially or within any companies really. Once you had a child, you either had your child, and then when you were ready and you had enough support, childcare support, you would go back, but you'd only be able to do quite small projects, and even then at Adventures in Motion Pictures, we were doing quite long tours already by that point. So I sort of thought, okay, well, maybe this isn't, maybe I won't carry on dancing, I don't know. But what did happen is when I did say I was pregnant and I couldn't be in the cast of Swan Lake, there was a really lovely discussion that was had about what I could do while I was pregnant. And that's when I became the rehearsal director. And so suddenly I was in a position where I was still working and pregnant, and I was the rehearsal director. So I was sort of progressing in terms of my own practice as well. So that made it feel that I could maybe have some sort of life after I'd had Isabel, but I wasn't entirely sure what that would be. So after I had Isabel, I realised there was no way I was finished performing, absolutely not, wanted to carry on. And very quickly, once I'd said that, there was another discussion with Matthew and Catherine Doré, who was the producer at the time. And what happened is that I went into Swan Lake, and it's actually when Michela started. So Michela started on Swan Lake, and that's when I had just had Isabel. I'd been out of work for 5 months. I also, no money, there was no financial support. And I really wanted passionately to start dancing again, but also needed to financially, really. And it all happened really quickly. And Matthew and Catherine were really good at going, right, no, we want you to do it. We're going to support you. But there was nothing else really happening in the industry at that time to help anybody who was in my position. And it was only because they decided that they were going to help that it actually happened. Yeah. And I was supposed to go in and just do 3 performances a week and note a couple of shows. But there were so many injuries that I ended up going in and doing 8 shows a week straight off. And that was really difficult because I was literally pelting when the show finished. I literally ran home, would grab Isabel and feed her because I was still breastfeeding at the time, and I was exhausted from start to finish. But thereafter, after we'd sort of got into the swing of it, I was then in a position when we went on tour to do things like work from Tuesday to Friday. Yeah. So I'd arrive on a Tuesday morning, leave on a Friday night. And when we went to LA, for example, I would do 6 weeks of performances, and then somebody else would take over. And so we started the idea of job sharing roles, which we try and do as much as we can now. Yeah. And I think after all of that, after me talking too much, what that has done is it's made it easier for other people who do have children and who work with New Adventures now, to be able to still have a life within New Adventures. It's not easy. And sometimes the job sharing is quite difficult because there's no extra money. You're just literally sharing that wage. But we are trying to get better at helping all parents to be able to work.
And you're certainly trailblazed through your own personal experience in order to really set that up and make it possible. And absolutely, with the faces on Zoom that we can see, that's made it possible for them, which is amazing. And I guess that brings me on to Kerry and Lou. You've got quite different roles in the company. How do you share your time between parenting and the responsibilities that you've got to do? So let's start off with Kerry.
So I am resident artist for the company, and I work part-time at the moment. So that's 3 days a week on paper, and it's but with the knowledge that when I'm running programs and delivering, that I might work more than 3 days a week. But what's wonderful about that is that we're able to really advance plan. So I'm able to really advance plan my childcare provision along with that, which is really helpful. Yeah. me and my partner, he's a freelancer, so he works in the health industry and as a dance teacher. We juggle our working responsibilities and our parenting responsibilities. So we very much co-parent, and we work out our schedule together. That can be challenging. It's quite military provision sort of scheduling, also because my job it's not a very I work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, these hours kind of job, and there needs to be a sort of sense of fluidity and a sense of flexibility. So that is the same in terms of the childcare. So that can be challenging. I'm really lucky we have our outside childcare providers. My son goes to nursery 2 times a week, and I have the wonderful grandparents who can do school pickup and things as we need. So it does take military precision and advanced planning, and some tenacity. But what's really wonderful is that I am incredibly supported by the organisation. I feel that there's a really open dialogue. There's a real sort of open conversation that continues. So we discuss if it's working, if it's not working. I'm able to be really, I'm able to lead on how I schedule my time. If I need to work from home, when that's appropriate, I'm very much able to do that. If I can work I can work flexibly. So if I need to work in the mornings and then in the evenings, at some points, you know, I'm able to lead that to a certain extent where appropriate, and that is a massive support. It means it really takes the pressure off, and that is really wonderful, and that's what allows me to do what I do in the way that I do it. And I think without that understanding and that support, then it would be incredibly difficult. So that is something that New Adventures provides in a really brilliant way, and that it's a continuous dialogue. So it isn't a one size fits all. It's, you know, it's about your circumstance and your situation and how, you know, it can work with that. So I think that's it really.
Great.
The only other thing I was going to say was just about, also as a parent, I think we all know that kind of real sort of fine tuning of time where everything's balanced, and if you don't make that train, and if one thing falls apart, then, you know, this thing doesn't happen. And I think having the support and understanding of my my colleagues and then also my line managers about those kinds of situations, and a real understanding of that, okay, this has happened, you know, we can problem solve and we can deal with this. That is also a really major pressure that's taken off, you know, too. So I think that's a really important factor as well, actually, because we all know how very tightly run sometimes parenting and working needs to be, and things do fall through the cracks sometimes.
And skills, I'm sure, that you're really drawing upon in this moment in time, which we'll talk a little bit later about then how we work in a pandemic context. Brilliant, Kerry, thank you. Lou, your job's a bit more administratively based, but I'm quite passionate that women in dance aren't just those who are performing, because it's quite a extraordinary industry and beast. And how do you juggle your time and your responsibilities?
Yeah, so I mean, doing a kind of administrative role does mean that the structure of my days and my weeks is kind of closer to that of my kids when they're in school. So I do have set days and I can plan ahead. One of the things about parenting that I found really interesting is that I assumed that as your kids got older, they would need you less, but I've kind of discovered that in a way they almost need you more. And so I'm quite fortunate at New Adventures that I have a lot of flexibility in my role. So my husband doesn't have any flexibility in his at all. So all of those things that need doing, all the appointments, the doctors, the dentist, kids off sick, all of that falls to me. So I'm very, very fortunate that I'm able to work around that. So I'm able to work from home whenever I'm needed. And I also have a flexible working arrangement where I tend to do an earlier day. So I tend to go in earlier in the morning than most of the team, and then I can go home earlier in the evening just to see what the teenagers are getting up to at home. I think one of the other things about having slightly older children is that once they're out of school at 3:30, I start getting calls and texts, and they don't kind of appreciate that I'm at work quite a lot. So yeah, there are those kind of pinch points in the day, and I know in the afternoons that they'll be kind of calling on me quite a lot, which is kind of fine. And also one of the other things about having older kids is that they do very much need you, and it's very important to be looking out for their own mental health. So I find that I'm quite my brain is quite split sometimes when I'm aware when they have pinch points, if they have exams and they have things going on. So I need to be able to sort of compartmentalize when I'm at work. I've got a big meeting, but I know that one of my kids has got something that's kind of big going on. But it's absolutely brilliant doing this at New Adventures. One of our values is family. So we have 3 values, and one of them is family. And I think that's really important for us as a team. So we do all support each other. There's lots of open dialogue. If anyone has any mini crises or anything, everyone's very, very flexible. People are very, very quick to support, to kind of chip in where other help's needed. So yeah, I'm very, very fortunate to have the support here at New Adventures.
Fantastic. It's just so great to hear. And it's the flexibility and trust. And again, we'll come back to the COVID stuff, but I think it's really showing up to people that flexible working absolutely can work. And it's just trusting that your colleagues will crack on with the job, which I think for a lot of us in dance is kind of a no-brainer, but the rest of the world is sort of waking up to it, really. Michela and Imogen, just to kind of go back to those with more physically based roles, and again, it's not just performers but rehearsal directors or your practitioners working in the community. What sort of physical support might they have for re-entering back into the workplace once they've had a baby? Is it like a physio, or do they have access to company physio, or is it more peer-to-peer support? Or
well, so I mean, I'll pass to Michela shortly, but I suppose one of the things that when we and Michela can talk directly about sort of us and how New Adventures have supported Michela's sort of doing that and coming back into the workplace. But I think certainly on a physical sense, it's about physio. It's about looking at all of our dancers as a whole in terms of support, physical, mental well-being, which is also why we're committed to doing this wellness week. For us, it's not just about keeping fit, it's keeping about mentally healthy, and that process about conversation, open dialogue, and I think the sort of the words that kind of keep coming up from Etta and Kerry and Lou is all about flexibility, conversation, and not one size fits all. I think for everyone coming back to work, whether it's desk-based or physical-based, it's different for everybody, and it's about having that open conversation and encouraging an ability to talk about what the needs are, that you can kind of reach a place that works for everyone. But yeah, absolutely, it's looking after everybody, particularly coming back to work and easing in. I think Etta, you sort of said coming back originally supposed to be 3 performances a week and straight into 8, so hopefully we've improved that a little bit. So maybe Michela can talk a bit more about her direct experience of coming back.
Yeah, in terms of physical training, I think for dancers that have children, especially for women, there's a little bit of pressure in terms of getting back into your physical shape, best shape, and being able to endure that amount of shows and classes, and I think that is something we make it into an issue because we spend time with the kids, and it just builds into the back of your head, the mind. Can I go back into this sort of schedule? Can I do what I used to do before having kids? And it can really make you feel a bit insecure before you go back in. But I sort of discovered that our bodies are quite incredible, and after years and years of training, your body has a memory, muscle memory, and you do regain exactly the same, not exactly, but very much the same shape you had before having kids. but I think it's quite a personal journey in terms of some people manage to schedule, doing a class every day. I found it quite difficult to put a different head on and just go and do a class, while I had kids that were quite little. So things kept shifting. As they got older and they started going to school, then I had more clarity of schedule, so I could do my own class or go somewhere to do class. So things shifted. And again, it comes back to the idea of is something that keeps evolving, your status as a parent and your relationship to your kids and to your employer is something that keeps shifting. So you have to sort of adjust all the time and find a new schedule that works for that phase of your life and that phase of your kids' life as well. But that's really nice that the company keeps this conversation open. And again, what works for me might not work for someone else. So we just kept talking about what would I need, and did I need an extra day off, from rehearsals to make things work, or so there was always this sort of open conversation. How can we make this work for everyone?
I think as well that the kind of celebration of each unique individual is just gorgeous, but also just the real value and investment that you have in each other as a team, and that it's not just kind of capturing people at one moment in time in their life. It's kind of like you said, with the evolution of you as people and artists, and how those personal external influences are contributing to your artistry, as well as obviously all the kind of practical implications, and definitely kind of if you have more than one child, depending on how far you had them apart, it could be sort of 9 years before you kind of are in a place where they're both at school, and that can be a real challenge. And I think sometimes our dancer training sets us up in a really good way to be disciplined and do the schedules and all that kind of stuff, but can also trip us up when we haven't got a structure to hold on to, and it's all kind of really chaotic, and that's something I definitely struggle with.
I find that that's something I had to really learn, to sort of let go and accept that something's got to give. And I think women in general and dancers put themselves under a lot of pressure in so many ways. But it's important to accept that something's got to give, and that meant that if I focused on work, maybe dinner wouldn't be so exciting that evening, and it would be something really plain. And I think it's really important to remember those things in the smaller scale, that you have to let go, and it's fine, just focus on priorities, and also the fact that it's very transient. So for that stint of 4 or 5 months of contract is going to be like this, and you have to accept it and embrace it. Maybe the chaos, the pile of washing, and then it will just shift again. It will be another phase, and you can work on other things and make your schedule and your dinner is much more interesting, But I think it's important sometimes to remind women and mothers and parents in general about the fact you have to let go on certain things, and it's okay. It's fine.
I think
one of the
go on, sorry, Kerry.
I was going to say, one of the things that I really learned from Michela, because I've got a few real sort of mentors in this group, is about being really clear about what is really possible for you and your situation at that time, and what isn't. And that's one thing I really felt that I learned from Michela, in terms of perhaps approaching a new contract, and being really clear up front about what that is, and so that those things, if they're possible, can be put in place, like I'm able to do the rehearsal period and a shorter contract, or actually I'd really love to be part of the project, but I can only do it as a job share, or but to know for yourself what what's actually possible, and to have that clarity and be able to communicate that really well is really useful, brilliant. And I think that's been really helpful for me to learn.
I think picking up just what Lou said about having family as one of the values, what I've often found talking to lots of women and men is sometimes there's a struggle that when they become a parent, that the art form and the parent responsibilities are jockeying for top dog position. But I think what's different about New Adventures is there's an equality around those two entities and a synergy around those two entities, which is why it's able to work. And also, like you said, you've got other mentors in the company that you can look towards. And again, that's, big thanks to Etta for that, and not just for the company, just, beyond in the industry that, Kerry and I, not off screen, we're talking about, the challenges of finding other female role models sometimes who have families in the industry. It's not always that, they're not always that easy to find. But I think that having those values really show, and also being able to support people when they're in a really vulnerable place. Michela talked about the insecurity of returning when your body is doing something slightly different to what it usually does, even though it's designed to create life in that way and sustain life. People are in a really vulnerable place, and having, again, that trust and that open dialogue really helps all of you be able to thrive as parents in the workplace, and especially one that's quite challenging at times. Have we had any anything from Alan on his perspective of being a dad?
We have actually, and I'll read it to you as best I can. What's great is it's something we haven't mentioned, but I'm sure we all feel. So Alan said that what I find the hardest of being a dad in the industry is the guilt. So feeling like you're not always doing your bit as a parent when you're away for long periods of time on tour, and you're leaving your partner to do that other side of things. And you become more of a support on the phone rather than a physical presence, contributing to the family. He said, I find UK touring harder than international touring, as when you're international, you can't get home. So, when you're in the UK, you try and get home as much as possible, and which case means that you're often really exhausted and tired, because you're working, but then you're also traveling and trying to get home and spend that quality time with your family. And sometimes is that quality time. What's really great is that I have a supportive partner, and when you're at home, making the most of your time with the kids and your partner. He said, right now we have never spent so much time together. It's fantastic.
I was going to say something about guilt, because I've spoken to lots of parents who are further, in their early stages of parenting, or teenagers, and I suffered terrible guilt all the time, and that thing of trying to make sure I was doing really well at work and then rushing home and trying to be a really good mum. It was so hard, but all I can say is, coming out of the other end of it, is that my daughter is a hard worker, really enjoys her life, is a great human being, and obviously missed me when I wasn't around, but it didn't do her any harm. She's a really wonderful person. So trying to just say, what you're doing is okay. You're a great parent. Keep doing what you're doing, and don't feel so much guilt, because they are going to be okay. Your children will be okay. And I get that message through all the time.
I actually sort of made a decision to myself when I went back to work the first time. I went back full time, and I've always been full time since having kids. And I was lucky to have sort of a good amount of maternity leave where I was before, and I had 8 months off for my first child, and then I took a full year with the twins because there were 2 of them, and I thought, I'm not doing this again. So I thought I'd take the full year that I was able to have, and I was lucky because I was in a position where that was a support from my employer. But I also made a really clear decision that it worked really well for me to go back full time and to not feel guilt about it. And I was brought up by a single parent. My mum brought me and my sister up, and I always sort of feel really like she didn't have time to feel guilt because it was just survival actually. And she used to do kind of multiple jobs just to get by. And I sort of really took that with going, this is the right thing for me to sort of work full time, to do the best job I can do, because I know I need to be full time to do the job I want to do in the way I want to do it. But then I'm also going to make sure that when I'm not working, I'm going to enjoy the time I'm with them. And actually that's been something that I've really ensured that if it kind of creeps in, that I sort of shake it off and go, no, because I know they've got an amazing, my husband's amazing, and they spend a lot of time with him, and he's, you know, it's absolutely a team effort, and I'm lucky enough to have that. But I feel there is that underlying thing about trying to do everything. I think everything I'm hearing is really, really true, and you hear about beating yourself up about stuff, but I think it's that guilt thing of refusing to feel guilt, because I know that it's absolutely, they get me at my best when I know I could be at my best at work. I could be the best mum for them. So I think there's also that about accepting that that's how it works, and it's not for everyone in that way. But I think most of us would say that we're better at being parents when we enjoy and we love our work. And I think when we don't have that, that's when, and some people don't, you know, that's not for everyone, but certainly I think it's accepting that that's okay to feel like that, and it's okay to enjoy work, and it's okay to think coffee by myself while it's still hot. Hooray!
Is it also placing a little seed as well in, you know, if we want to keep equality, you know, between parents, you're setting an example to your own kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That both parents, you know, work equally as much as possible, or that some periods of time you have to work more than your partner, and I do think it just leaves them with this, you know, image that your parents are equally working and equally parenting. And I think that's how you move on from, you know, the way women lived before. You know, we just have to set the example and put the seed into their minds.
I think as well, we all have vocational passions and jobs, and that's quite a marked difference sometimes from other mums at the school gates, because it's so much part of our identity. And I certainly knew the 6 weeks when I had Callie 7 years ago was the first time I'd not worked since leaving college. You know, it felt really weird, and I was like itching to get back into the studio. But I think sometimes that maternity leave gives you time to reflect on who you are without that, but also gets you to understand that actually you do need that, and that's actually okay. And ditching the guilt. It would be remiss of me as an ambassador for Parents and Carers in Performing Arts campaign not to talk about the best practice charter, because in the last few years there's more conversation like the ones we're having now to really help ourselves and future generations. And I know that New Adventures are signed up to that charter. Imogen, do you want to just give us a really brief kind of outline of what that is?
Well, I mean, I think it's really important. I mean, the conversation has changed. I remember when PIPA was first set up, and that kind of journey it's been on, and how important it's become more central to the conversation we've been having. And so I think for us committing to that, to signing up to that charter, is about us recognising that we want to be responsive, we want to have an open dialogue, we want to encourage a work environment that makes parents and those with caring responsibilities to feel like they can have that conversation, and that they can have an open dialogue, and they are trusted to say what they need and what works for them. So I think signing up to it and being part of that network is really important for New Adventures, because we've been doing a lot of stuff unofficially, I suppose, because conversations have come up, and I think, you know, looking at policies, a lot of stuff isn't necessarily written down in black and white, but it's a conversation. I think all the conversation we've all had have all been conversational, because there's been a confidence around saying, I trust that I'm good at my job and I want to have a conversation about what works for me. But equally, it's about us challenging ourselves to make sure that we are open with policies, and that we are open with recognising that people work in different ways and need a level of flexibility. So I think signing up to the Charter is a really important part of us acknowledging that publicly as well, to people who might be new to the company as well, and might recognise they're coming into a place that does place value on family, and does place value on that. So yeah, we're really thrilled to be part of it.
Fantastic. And finally, it's been really brilliant for the last half an hour to be talking about how life used to be, because we now find ourselves not in a room together on Zoom having this talk currently as we're living through a pandemic. How has that, it's clearly impacted everybody, but what kind of changes has that made to New Adventures at the moment, and how you're managing that and parenthood? Massive question in the last 5 minutes. Save the best till last.
Well, I think it probably, just to sort of kick things off, I think it absolutely sums up the things that everyone is dealing with, how they can manage work and family differently. Certainly, I think all of us have different levels of responsibilities and different ages of kids and different needs of how that's sort of working. So I think it's trying to find a moment of common connection, that we can connect as a team each day, but equally respecting that people will have different working hours and times and space to think and to be creative. But it's sort of challenging, but also I feel like it's brought a lot of us together in sort of creating and more conversations, even though they're virtual, certainly from that perspective. So that's from me. I mean,
I think definitely as well, with obviously the Real Adventures programme, you've been at one of the companies who've really thought on their feet really quickly about how you can still engage with your audience, but just in a slightly different way. And you know, this morning I think you released the South Bank show on Cinderella, that I said to Kerry I probably watched it about 50 times on VHS back in '97. But all those sorts of things, and particularly obviously this week as well, it is, I think, opening up a way of engaging new audiences, perhaps, that where everybody's stuck inside and trying to find culture and connection online, there might be, albeit, you know, being respectful that it's a very difficult crisis, some positive outcomes from it that we haven't really, you know, encountered before.
Yeah, I think we're connecting to a really big audience, because we're doing all of this stuff on our social media platforms, and really trying to think about, as you say, how we can connect and how we can reach people and make sure people still feel that they're part of something. So and we're doing two things. We're working with the dance company and trying to keep their connection going, and then we're working with everyone else out there, which I think is really lovely. You know, I think we're doing some really brilliant things, and we're all trying to think about things that we're not just slinging things out there. We're trying to really think sympathetically and empathetically about what people need at this time, because it's a really difficult time for everybody. Yeah. And trying to touch at all the bases. So what happens with kids? What happens if you're a young graduate dancer? You know, trying to seek out and find out what people need and how we can deliver projects for them, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, for example, Wednesday you led class online on Instagram. Yeah. Which was brilliant, and I think when I kind of looked at it, I think there were probably about 400 people live. I mean, we wouldn't probably be reaching those kind of levels of audience in one go unless we were kind of Move It or something like that, but where people probably actually have enough space decently and to be close to you, to actually work quite more deeply than we possibly thought we would do through a video camera.
Yeah, and you learn new things every day. I mean, every day I'm so not tech savvy, but I'm getting more tech savvy with every day. I'm quite proud of myself. But yeah, it is that thing. And now that we've done it, I really feel like we could do it a lot more, even when we get past this pandemic. I think there's lots more opportunity.
Kerry?
Just on that point, I think it's really interesting because as a parent who might find it really difficult to actually go to a regular class, you know, one of the things that I think is really positive for me about, you know, obviously our Real Adventures, but also other great online, you know, offers, is that you're able to access that at home, and that, you know, those very precious 20 minutes that you've got, you might actually be able to really do something for you, whereas, you know, that's sometimes really, really tricky, you know, especially a sort of regular thing. So I think that's so positive.
Yes, because I mean, it's dream content really, because about a year ago I aggregated what material I could find on the Dance Mama site. But obviously now it's just it's like a tidal wave of like amazing content. I can't quite keep up with it and just have to keep reposting everything on the Facebook page. But absolutely, I think going forward, and just sort of as our last kind of sort of thing, kind of, I guess if we went round and gave like one hope we had for parents in dance for the future, I think mine would definitely be that kind of this quality of content. I mean, having access to US on a Wednesday would, you know, otherwise not be possible unless I was either in the company or taking a class that you might be doing elsewhere in London or around the country through New Adventures. It really opens it up, and which is really amazing. Yeah, so that would be my hope. Should we finish off on a hopeful note? Lou, what's your hope for the future for parents in dance?
My hope for the future is that now that we're all quite used to this weird way of working, everyone's at home, they're working remotely, we're learning a lot more about flexible working and about tech, and about not having to do everything face to face and not having to travel just to have productive meetings. I mean, we are discovering that you can have really, really productive meetings. You can share all kinds of things. You can learn new skills online. And actually, I think in terms of flexible parenting in the future, we are kind of building up a real knowledge of understanding and skills that will hopefully increase flexibility.
Brilliant. Michela?
Well, first of all, I feel this situation has made me realize how much I love my life in terms of artistically, and how much I like being with my family. So it's just put a different filter on things that I gave for granted. So that's been a really revealing thing for me. And yeah, I hope it also allows the arts world to realize how important, well, in general, the whole world, to realize how important the arts are and how much they enrich our lives, and also how much parents can still bring to the art world. So yeah, I'm hoping this creates a filter for everyone to sort of acknowledge the importance of artists in life.
Amazing. Kerry?
Yeah, I mean, similarly to both Lou and Michela, but I guess just to look at a different perspective, I think that we're having some really positive conversations about parenting and working, and the value of parents and what we can offer as we develop and grow in whatever ways we're doing that. And I would love to see that some of these practices that we're talking about and policies that we're starting to talk about could extend as far as possible and for that to include those artists who work for themselves and who are freelancers, and because that is an area where it's really tough too. So I guess in a really sort of blue sky dream, that these things can extend and be as far reaching as possible.
Yeah, brilliant, excellent. Imogen?
So I think all of those things in terms of the different elements. I think what's interesting is you're having all these Zoom calls where you're in people's houses, and you see behind the scenes. You have an insight into people's lives that are often so kept quite separate. And I think there's a real appreciation that people in their work lives have a lot that they're dealing with behind the scenes. I think that blurring can have potential to be really positive in understanding what people bring to the workplace, and how that could be sort of molded into a really positive thing, and how we need to respect that people have different things going on. So I think as long as that flexible working, that element of creativity, that element of parents and carers in the performing arts, and that richness of experience that people can bring to the table, that's I think all these things can help us be better when we come out the other side.
Amazing. And finally, Etta?
Well, basically everything that everybody else has said, really. I hope that we will always continue to work with artists who are parents, and further that and make it much easier to be able to work as much as we can within the parameters of doing a show. It's always really difficult. So I hope that gets better and better, and we get better at dealing with that. And the other thing is, because of this pandemic and how we are all how we are all communicating with each other, that we can take bits of all of those things that we've learned so far and continue using all of that, like the open classes, for example, on social media, different ways of really connecting with people, because I think it has really made a massive difference. And I think we can use all of the things that we've been doing and keep pushing the boundaries of all of that.
Amazing. Well, thank you. I think we've come to the end of our time on this. I think everybody should keep checking out the Wellness Week and what Real Adventures programme is going to be bringing up for us all week. And everybody should stay safe at home, stay at home, and stay well. And it's been a huge privilege for me to be able to speak to you, particularly on this subject. And just lovely to see all your wonderful faces.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you
Very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.